You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood, art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood. As many of you already know, I love games, and today I thought it'd be fun to focus on the Rubik's Cube. But before we get to that, I want to give a quick update on this year's Arts Madness tournament. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been participating and everyone who has helped spread the word of the tournament. It's really cool to see this get bigger every year. It's just validating when people take an interest in something that I've worked hard to put together. So thank you all for your kindness and support. Round 1 saw what I would consider some big upsets. Yayoi Kusama actually won Arts Madness 2 years in a row, which is why I took her out of the tournament last year to give another artist a chance. And this year, she was eliminated in the first round. If that weren't bad enough, she lost to Andy Warhol, the artist she said ripped her off. Now, on the topic of artists with personal connections, none would be more personal than the matchup of husband and wife. In round 1, Frida Kahlo lost to her husband, Diego Rivera. I watched the results roll in all week, and the majority of the matches were really close, with many trading the lead multiple times before Saturday's cutoff. The one notable exception was Hokusai's Great Wave, which absolutely crushed Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. This week, once again, most matches could go either way, and I cannot wait to see who will advance to round 3. Currently, the closest matches are Leonardo versus Raphael, so we'll see which Ninja Turtle is the best of them all. Keith Haring is really close in his match up against Emily Cam Noire. Machu Picchu and the Taj Mahal are neck and neck, just about 5 votes apart as of the time of this recording. And King Tut is facing a tight battle against the Terracotta Army. I can't wait to see who comes out on top in all those matches, and of course, please keep voting for your favorites every week at whoartedpodcast.com/vote. Now, on to the actual topic for today, the Rubik's Cube. Erno Rubik was born July 13th, 1944 in Budapest, Hungary. His mother was a poet, father worked in manufacturing. Erno studied sculpture as well as architecture. And one of his early jobs was as a professor, and he described being not much older than his students. He was still developing his talents as an artist and a designer and trying to differentiate himself. One thing Rubik always loved was models. He was a sculptor, and he would make geometric models with the idea of making a puzzle focusing on math and geometry. Here's a little bit of math on the Rubik's Cube. Cubes obviously have 6 faces to them. Now, each face on the standard Rubik's Cube has 9 small colored squares, meaning 9 squares times 6 faces gives you 54 small colored squares on the surface of the cube. Now, if I can just nerd out a little bit on the math here, I think it's important to understand and appreciate how complex this seemingly simple toy really is. There are 8 corner pieces on the cube, meaning that each corner piece can go to one of 8 different spots. When one corner piece is settled, that means each remaining corner piece has 7 options. After that, there are 6 options for the remaining corner pieces, and so on. So to figure out all the different permutations, that means that just for the corners, the math would work out to 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. That's how we determine the number of possible combinations. And multiplying it all out, there are 40,320 possible arrangements of just those 8 corner pieces. Then when we remember that each of those corner pieces has 3 faces, that means we need to multiply that 40,320 times 3 to the 7th. It's 3 to the 7th power, not 3 to the 8th, because the final corner would only have one possible outcome. Kind of like how in the permutations exercise we did before, we didn't need to do that final step of multiplying times 1. When you broaden it out, multiplying the 12 different edge pieces, those 54 squares can be arranged into over 43 quintillion different combinations. There's a bit more to it, as moving one piece will affect others, and if you want to see the full formula, I'll include it in the show notes for those who are curious. With that many different combinations, it seems like solving the Rubik's Cube would be essentially impossible. It took Rubik himself months to do it, but interestingly, no matter the arrangement, a Rubik's Cube can always be solved in 20 or fewer moves. People who have learned to do it have practiced, and speed cubing is a popular competitive event. The current record, as of the time of this recording, is held by Max Park, who solved the Rubik's Cube in 3.13 seconds. Of course, this is an arts podcast, so I want to shift focus away from the math and the sport of the Rubik's Cube to the beauty of the cube. It's a puzzle and a fun toy from a talented artist, but today, at least one other talented artist has come up with a new way to work with the Rubik's Cube. A California teenager named Daniela Haim looks at the Rubik's Cube not as a toy, but an art medium. I'll link to her Instagram in the show notes. She goes by The Cubist, and the work that is coming from this 16-year-old girl is absolutely amazing. Now, she started with a relatively small piece made of just a few cubes. The original Mario was a subject perfectly suited for the pixelated style of Rubik's Cube art. She arranged 24 Rubik's Cubes to create that first work, and then she asked her parents to help her out and buy her a few more. Well, 1,000 more. I can only imagine how that conversation went. I mean, I'm on the fringes of the art world, super supportive of kids being creative and trying new things, but if my kid came in asking for 1,000 Rubik's Cubes, I'd have some serious questions. Like, was the school holding some sort of oddly specific toy drive? Was she being bullied by a lot of nerds? No, Daniela wanted to make art just, like 43 quintillion times harder. As you might expect, it took some time to convince her parents to make that kind of an investment in such an unusual art medium. But Daniela's patient and persistent. I guess she'd have to be in order to solve hundreds, if not thousands, of Rubik's Cubes in order to artfully arrange them. It took a few months, but she eventually convinced her parents to invest in the cubes, and she's been creating stunning artworks ever since. She starts by plotting out the image on her iPad. She grids the image digitally, and then she gets to work solving the cubes. I guess maybe we should put some air quotes around solving there, because she isn't really solving it in the traditional way. She twists and turns the cubes. She doesn't take like a shortcut peeling off the stickers or anything like that. But her goal is not to get all the colors to one side. She twists each cube to a specific arrangement that will work for a given part of the artwork. She calls herself the Cubist in a bit of wordplay that I absolutely love. But really the work feels a bit more of a mashup of pop art and pointillism. But regardless of how you categorize these pieces, she is putting an awesome twist on some old favorites.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.